On a frozen winter morning at Denver International Airport, a police dog named Shadow stopped in his tracks, ears stiff, breath sharp, eyes locked on a single navy blue suitcase sliding down the belt. It wasn't the size, it wasn't the color, it was something deeper, something only instinct could sense. And when Shadow growled, low, ancient, almost human, the entire terminal felt the air shift. Seconds later, officers opened the suitcase, and what they found inside changed everything. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments. Leave a like if you believe some heroes walk on four legs, and make sure to subscribe for more stories where courage still finds its way through the darkness. A thin veil of winter fog drifted through Denver International Airport, softening the hard edges of metal beams and glass walls, as if the cold itself was trying to hush the morning rush. Officer Ryan Carter moved steadily along the terminal floor with his canine partner Shadow, a 5-year-old sable German shepherd whose coat shifted between dark bronze and black depending on how the light struck it. Shadow was tall for his breed, muscular but not bulky, and his amber eyes held a quiet intelligence that often unsettled people who didn't know him. Ryan trusted those eyes more than any scanner. He had learned long ago, on dusty roads overseas under hostile skies, that animals sense truths humans were too distracted or too proud to notice. Ryan himself carried the look of a man shaped by war and years of service. Square jaw, a faint scar over his right brow, short, dark hair flecked prematurely with gray, and a posture that stayed alert even when he stood still. He was polite but distant, thoughtful but hard to read. A man who had lost enough in life to build walls around his heart, and yet those walls always cracked for Shadow. The dog was the one creature that pulled him back toward the world. They were halfway past the baggage claim hall when Shadow suddenly halted. His ears snapped forward, tail stiffening as if someone had gripped an invisible wire along his spine. Ryan felt the leash tighten before he heard the growl, a low, primal vibration rolling out of Shadow's chest. The dog's nose twitched rapidly, his entire body oriented toward a single point on the moving carousel, a navy blue suitcase sliding out from the rubber curtain. At first glance, it looked painfully ordinary, the kind of luggage sold everywhere, the kind no one could remember 5 minutes after seeing it. But Shadow saw something else. The dog lunged forward with such force that Ryan staggered a step. Shadow's paws scraped against the polished floor as he clawed toward the suitcase, barking now, sharp, alarmed, the kind of barking that ripped through instinct before training. His teeth flashed, his breath fogged the air. It wasn't aggression, it was urgency. Something about that suitcase felt alive, as if the fabric itself were holding its breath. Passengers stopped in their tracks. A mother pulled her child close. A businessman backed away, muttering. From somewhere behind Ryan, an elderly woman with thinning white hair and a trembling cane whispered, "Is it a bomb, officer?" Her voice quivered, not just from age, but from memories. She looked like someone who had lived through too many decades of bad news to doubt her own fear. Ryan didn't answer. His heart thudded once heavy. His body tightened instinctively, shoulders rising, breath shortening. Decades of training flooded back. How to scan a threat, how to predict an angle of explosion, how to protect crowds. But he also knew Shadow. The dog had never misread danger. Not once. Not even in the chaos of his early deployments, when Shadow had saved 2 officers from stepping on a pressure plate hidden under desert sand. If Shadow reacted like this, something was wrong. But the wrongness wasn't only in the suitcase. A far colder realization slid down Ryan's spine as he lifted his eyes. No one was approaching to claim the luggage. The conveyor belt kept turning. People kept claiming bags, but this suitcase circled again and again, uncollected, untouched, as if abandoned intentionally. Ryan's pulse quickened. He radioed for backup, his voice steady but his mind racing. Abandoned luggage was common. Abandoned luggage that triggered a trained canine into a frenzy was not. The airport intercom crackled overhead. Final call for the owner of a navy blue suitcase at baggage claim carousel 19. Please report immediately. The voice repeated, echoing across metal beams and tiled floors. No one moved toward it. Instead, Ryan noticed someone else. Far across the hall, near a column partially swallowed by shadow, stood a tall figure wearing a black coat and a pulled-down beanie that obscured most of his face. He wasn't panicking like the others. He wasn't even curious. He was watching. And when Shadow's barks intensified, the man tilted his head slightly, as though confirming something Ryan couldn't yet understand. Their eyes met, Ryan's tense, the stranger's unreadable, and then the man turned away. Not hurriedly, not nervously, almost casually. Shadow erupted into another round of barking, more frantic now. His paws skidded as he tried to drag Ryan toward the retreating figure, nails clicking sharply against the floor. "Shadow, heel!" Ryan barked, but the dog barely heard him. Instinct had taken the reins. The stranger slipped behind a cluster of confused passengers and made his way toward the sliding glass doors that led into a dim, connecting corridor. Shadow yanked harder, muscles rippling beneath his fur. Ryan's heart hammered. He felt the tension of a cliff moment, the sense that choices made in seconds would shape hours, maybe days, ahead. Then the automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss, the man's silhouette slipping through. By the time Ryan pushed past two startled travelers, the doors were already closing. And beyond them, the long corridor swallowed the stranger like a tunnel swallowing light. Shadow barked once more, a fierce, frustrated sound that echoed off glass and steel. Then, everything went silent. The air itself felt frozen, suspended between fear and the unknown, like the moment before a storm breaks. The cold inside the examination wing felt sharper than the winter fog outside, as if the steel walls had soaked up every ounce of fear lingering in the airport and breathed it back out. Ryan Carter walked beside Shadow, the German shepherd's nails tapping an uneven rhythm on the polished floor. The dog's amber eyes stayed fixed on the navy blue suitcase, now resting under bright examination lamps. To any other officer, the suitcase would have looked harmless, but Shadow's stillness was too focused, too unnatural. When Shadow froze, something was wrong. Ryan knew it in his bones. Two technicians wheeled the suitcase into the X-ray room. One of them, Mark Hensley, was a lanky man in his early 50s with a slouching posture and tired eyes that carried purple shadows beneath them. Years of night shifts had carved grooves into his cheeks, and his sandy gray hair stuck out from under his cap. Despite his worn appearance, he moved with surprising gentleness, like a man who had once been soft and was still trying to protect whatever softness he had left. "Let's get this done," he muttered, his voice hoarse, the words more to himself than to anyone else. The second technician, a young woman named Carla Ruiz, had short black hair cropped close to her scalp and a sharp, practical way of speaking. She was the type who didn't scare easily, but even she cast a wary look at the dog pressed against the glass window. "Whatever's inside that bag, he already hates it," she whispered. Shadow did not bark. He simply watched, utterly still, nose trembling with tiny, rapid motions. Ryan sensed the tension tightening in his partner's posture. It matched the tension building inside his own chest, the kind that reminded him of waiting outside a locked door during raids overseas, knowing that one breath too loud could get everyone killed. The X-ray machine hummed to life. A blue glow slid across the screen, painting the suitcase in bone-like outlines. Ryan leaned closer. There were no wires, no pipes, no explosive signatures, just a strange metal box lodged in the center of the suitcase, with edges too smooth and too perfect to belong to any commercial product. "Not a bomb," Carla said, "but it's weird." "Weird is worse than a bomb," Ryan muttered. Shadow pressed his nose to the lower part of the glass, letting out a soft, uneasy whine. Ryan's stomach tightened. Shadow rarely whined, not unless grief or fear brushed too close. Mark unlocked the suitcase latches with trembling fingers. The moment the lid cracked open, a thin breath of warm air escaped. Warm, impossibly warm compared to the cold room. Ryan frowned. That was wrong. Suitcases didn't breathe warmth. The lid lifted, and every person in the room froze. Inside, curled like a wounded bird, was a small girl around 6 years old. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, with faint bluish veins beneath her fragile surface. She had dark brown hair matted into soft curls across her forehead, and she clutched a tattered teddy bear whose missing button eye dangled by a thread. Her tiny chest rose and fell in shallow, trembling breaths. Carla gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Mark staggered back, but it was Emily Foster, the on-duty medical technician, who let out a broken cry. Emily was a woman in her early 30s with warm hazel eyes and curly auburn hair tied in a loose bun. Her face was usually calm, kind, and steady. She had a reputation for being the one who stayed composed during medical emergencies, but not this time. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Oh my God, who would do this to a child?" Her hands shook as she reached forward. Ryan didn't hesitate. He lifted the girl from the suitcase, feeling how light she was, too light, like a child who had missed too many meals and too many days of safety. Her breathing hitched when his arms wrapped around her, and she instinctively tightened her grip on the teddy bear, as though the toy were her only anchor left in the world. Shadow approached quietly, lowering his head, and gently licked the back of her hand. The gesture was so tender it sent a prickling heat behind Ryan's eyes. Shadow was apologizing in his own silent way. The girl stirred. Her eyelashes fluttered like moth wings. She blinked up at Ryan, unfocused at first, then sharpening with fear. "Don't let him take me," she whispered, her voice raw, as if scraped from the inside. "Don't let the man in the black coat take me back." Her small fingers clung to Ryan's sleeve. Before he could speak, her eyes rolled back and she collapsed into unconsciousness against his chest. Emily hurried forward with medical scanners. Ryan placed the girl gently on the exam table, feeling an ache crack open in a place he thought had gone numb years ago. He had seen children hurt before, too many times, and always too many for one lifetime. His throat tightened as Emily checked vitals. "No ID tag," Emily muttered. "No bracelet. Nothing." Carla rushed in with the girl's belongings, or rather, the absence of belongings. "Her passport's fake. Extremely fake. The chip doesn't even have a serial number." Emily tried scanning her fingerprints. The monitor beeped, red text flashing. No match, no records, no existence. "It's like she doesn't exist," Mark whispered, his voice hollow. Ryan felt a cold rage rising, not loud, not explosive, silent, focused, the kind that built inside a man who had seen too many monsters in human clothing. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. Someone had erased this child's life. Someone had put her in that suitcase, and someone, a man in a black coat, had walked away as if nothing mattered. Ryan clenched his jaw. He looked at Shadow, who met his gaze with the same burning, unspoken promise. They would find who did this. The security operations room always felt colder than the rest of the airport, as if the hundreds of screens lining the walls drained the warmth out of the air. Ryan Carter stepped inside with Shadow at his heel, the dog's tail low and stiff, his amber eyes scanning every shadow as if danger could slip through the floor tiles. The room hummed with electronic noise, static, keyboard clicks, and the quiet dread of people who had seen more than they wished to remember. The man operating the camera feeds was Detective Aaron Mills, a lean 45-year-old with a face carved by sleepless nights and too many disappointments. He had salt and pepper stubble, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that never seemed to blink fully. Eyes that told you he'd once trusted the world and regretted it ever since. A failed marriage, a daughter who refused to visit, and a career built on cases that left more questions than answers had shaped him into a man who used sarcasm like armor. Still, beneath that bitterness, Mills had an uncanny ability to detect patterns others missed. It was why Ryan had asked for him personally. "All right," Mills said, rolling his chair closer to the main monitor, cracking his knuckles. "Let's meet our mystery man in the black coat." Shadow gave a low growl. Mills raised an eyebrow. "Your dog hates him already? Wonderful. At least someone here has instincts." Ryan didn't smile. The weight of the little girl still pressed against his thoughts. The fragility of her breath, the terror in her whisper, the way her hands clung to his sleeve as though he were the last safe human in the world. Her face kept flashing before him, pale and bruised by fear, and the thought of anyone doing that to a child stirred something deep, something dangerously close to rage. The footage began to play. The first clip showed the international arrivals corridor, crowds spilling out like rivers, families waving signs, luggage carts squeaking. And then, him. A man in a long black coat, tall, straight-backed, moving with a smoothness that seemed rehearsed. His shoulders were broad, posture controlled, almost military. He didn't look around like normal travelers did. He seemed to glide. But the most disturbing part was how the cameras never caught his face. Each time he passed under a lens, he shifted slightly, turning his head, raising a hand, stepping behind a taller man, letting glare hide his features. Too perfect, too intentional. Jesus, Mills muttered. Either he's the luckiest son of a gun alive, or he knows exactly where every camera is. The next angle showed the little girl. She was holding a stuffed bear, walking a step behind a young airport volunteer. A teenage boy around 17 with acne, red hair, and an awkward posture suggesting he was new on the job. He wasn't a suspect, just a kid trying to help a lost child. But the man in black appeared again behind them, standing near a support column. The girl didn't see him. She didn't need to. Her shoulders stiffened, her steps faltered. Her tiny hand tightened around her toy. Fear radiated off her like heat. Ryan felt his jaw clench. Shadow pressed closer to him, sensing his tension. Mills switched cameras. Now the man lurked behind a family of 4, using their luggage cart as cover. Then behind a pillar. Then behind a maintenance worker pushing a mop bucket. Each position was calculated, as if he'd walked the airport dozens of times, memorizing every blind spot. Then came the footage that turned the room silent. The man in black lifted the little girl into his arms with a horrifying gentleness, like someone picking up something they owned. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She collapsed into stillness, as if terror had shut off her voice. He carried her behind the baggage carousel, crouched low, and with swift, practiced motions, he placed her inside the open navy blue suitcase. He tucked the teddy bear beside her. He adjusted her hair. He whispered something no camera could capture. Shadow let out a sudden snarl that made 2 officers jump. Mills swallowed. What kind of monster does that? Ryan didn't answer. His mind burned with anger and something else. Recognition. This wasn't random. This man moved like someone trained, someone who had handled fear before, someone who knew how to manipulate it. He's a handler, Ryan murmured. A professional. He doesn't work alone. Mills forced a weak laugh, trying to break the tension. What is he, a ninja? No one laughed, least of all Ryan. He had seen men like this overseas, men whose eyes stayed empty even while fires raged behind them, men who could disappear into crowds, shadows, or silence, men who didn't just follow orders, they believed in them. Play the last clip, Ryan said quietly. The screen flickered to a view facing the service corridor. The man in black closed the suitcase, stood, and for the briefest moment, one heartbeat, he turned toward the camera. His face was still hidden, but there was something unmistakable in his body language. Confidence, control, ownership, and then he walked away. Shadow whined sharply, tail rigid. At that moment, a soft cry came from behind them. The little girl had woken again in the adjoining room where Emily was tending to her. Ryan rushed in. The girl's small shoulders shook as she sobbed, tears streaking her cheeks. Her voice trembled. He took more kids. I heard them cry. Ryan knelt beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. She flinched at first, then collapsed into him, burying her face against his vest. Don't let him take me again. Ryan's heart twisted. Gently, he stroked her hair. I promise, he whispered. I will find every one of them. Shadow approached, lowering his head, and pressed his muzzle gently to the girl's forehead. A silent vow, spoken in the language of wolves and loyalty. A wave of freezing air swept through the loading bay as emergency shutters rolled down, sealing off the main terminals. Snow pressed against the tall glass panes like white static, a storm gathering outside, as if the sky itself disapproved of what had been hidden beneath this airport for so long. The flashing red lights along the ceiling cast sharp, pulsing shadows that made even ordinary corners feel sinister. Ryan Carter stood beside Shadow, feeling the tension in the dog's body travel up the leash like a live wire. Shadow's fur bristled along his spine, and every muscle in his frame, powerful thighs, strong shoulders, the hardened lines of a working German shepherd, pulled forward. His nose twitched rapidly, drawing in the faint scent that had started everything. The strange combination of burned plastic and crushed mint. It clung to the air, weaving through the sterile smell of the airport like a whispered confession. Go on, boy, Ryan murmured. His voice was steady, but his heart was anything but. The scent tugged at memories he wished he could forget. Nights in abandoned bunkers overseas, tracking insurgents through labyrinths of concrete and dust, knowing every step forward could be the last. The instinct he had spent years honing was screaming now, a deep, primal alarm telling him they were closing in on something worse than he had imagined. Shadow led him to a service elevator rarely used by staff. Its metal frame dented, the buttons yellowed with age, a relic from the airport's older infrastructure. When the doors opened, the smell hit stronger, almost tangible. Shadow sneezed sharply, then growled, a low, simmering sound full of anger, not fear. Ryan pressed the elevator button for sublevel 3, the old operational floor that had been decommissioned years ago. Few people even remembered it existed. As the elevator descended, the lights flickered, and in the dim reflection on the metal walls, Ryan could see his own face, the sharp angles, the fatigue pulling at the corners of his eyes, the worry lines carved deeper than he remembered. He ran a hand through his dark hair, exhaling heavily. "If they put kids down here," he whispered, finishing the sentence only in his mind. When the doors slid open, cold air surged in, colder than anything above ground. Sublevel 3 was an enormous basement of concrete tunnels, old equipment, and forgotten machinery. The once bustling nerve center of the airport now looked like the skeleton of a long-dead giant. Thick metal pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping occasionally, creating an echo that felt like someone walking just out of sight. Shadow followed the scent without hesitation. His paws made soft, muffled thuds over a thin layer of dust that had been disturbed by recent activity. Ryan's pulse quickened. Whoever had been down here was moving freely, confidently. That meant they knew the layout far better than he did. They reached a massive steel door at the far end of the hall, framed by walls that looked welded and reinforced long after the rest of the facility had been abandoned. The door stood nearly 8 feet tall, thick as a bank vault, coated with frost and rust. Ryan ran his gloved hand across its cold surface, feeling the bite of the metal. "Looks like a damn fortress," he muttered. Shadow's growl deepened, a sound so raw and furious it made Ryan's skin prickle. The dog wasn't just alert, he was enraged. It was the sound wolves made when they found a predator near their den. Ryan swallowed hard. "Whatever's behind this door," he whispered, "we're not walking into it alone." 2 officers arrived to assist. Officer Grant Dobson, a burly man with a shaved head and a russet beard that framed his square jaw, and Officer Leah Hart, a short but fiercely determined woman with sharp blue eyes and a bob of platinum blonde hair. Grant carried a portable battering ram, his muscular arms rippling as he positioned it. Leah steadied the frame, her breath visible in the cold air. Grant's personality was usually boisterous and loud, but now he was silent, jaw clenched. Leah's small hands trembled slightly, though her expression stayed focused. Even they could feel the wrongness radiating from the steel door. "On 3, Ryan ordered. They all braced. 1, 2, 3. The ram slammed into the door, shaking the walls. Another hit, then another. Metal groaned. Bolts popped. Finally, the door gave way with a scream of twisting steel. Cold darkness spilled out. Ryan stepped inside first, Shadow glued to his side. His flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating what looked like a makeshift command center of horror. Dozens of empty suitcases lay open on the floor, identical to the one the girl had been found in. A row of audio recorders crackled softly, tiny captured sobs echoing like trapped ghosts. Against the back wall, messy stacks of documents displayed hundreds of missing children's names, their photos blurred or crossed out. On a table, a set of devices with wires and microchips glistened under the light. Machines designed to erase fingerprints, irises, and digital identity. A factory of disappearance. Ryan froze. His stomach dropped, cold and heavy. Rage surged like wildfire, spreading through his chest, up into his throat, thinning his breath. His hands trembled around the flashlight. "God, what kind of operation is this?" he whispered, though part of him already knew. This wasn't a single madman. This was an organized machine. Shadow lifted his head and let out a long, aching howl, one that felt less like a dog's cry and more like the howl of a spirit mourning what had been lost in this place. Then a voice came from the darkness. "You're too late." Ryan spun around just as the beam of his flashlight landed on the man in the black coat. This time, the man wasn't hiding. He stood tall, face still shadowed, but posture relaxed, almost amused. "You shouldn't have come down here," he said softly, his voice smooth and cold. He tossed something to the floor, a split-second hiss, a stun grenade, flash, explosion of light. Shadow lunged, and the chase began through the echoing tunnels. Night wind slashed across the maintenance deck like a blade of ice, carrying the sharp sting of snow as Ryan Carter burst through the service door with Shadow at his side. From this height, the airport stretched below them like a glowing ocean, runways gleaming under towers of light, planes crawling like metallic whales preparing for flight. It should have been peaceful. Instead, it felt like standing on the edge of a storm the world didn't know existed. Ahead of Ryan, the man in the black coat was already climbing the vertical ladder bolted to the concrete wall. Now that Ryan was close enough, he saw more details: broad shoulders, powerful legs, and a scar carved from jawline to collar. The kind of scar you got from surviving someone else's nightmare. His hair was dark and close-cropped, military short, and his movements were too precise, too confident. Not a thug, not a wanderer. A professional shaped by shadows and sharpened by cruelty. Shadow raced to the base of the ladder, nostrils flaring as the familiar scent, burned plastic mixed with crushed mint, grew stronger. He looked up, amber eyes blazing. Ryan felt the dog's muscles coil beneath his fur like drawn wire. "Shadow, wait," Ryan hissed, but the shepherd had already leapt, scaling the first rungs with terrifying speed. The man in the black coat looked back, and for a heart-stopping instant, Ryan saw the man's face clearly. Pale skin, sunken cheeks, eyes like empty wells, void of remorse, void of fear, void of anything human. He knew he couldn't outrun Shadow. He reached for the knife strapped to his thigh. Ryan's pulse detonated. "Shadow, caution!" But Shadow wasn't listening anymore. He had slipped fully into the ancient instinct of his lineage. He launched upward with a roar, a sound older than airports, older than cities, older than men. The sound of the wolf that still lived inside him. The man swung the knife downward. Shadow twisted midair and slammed into him before the blade could find flesh. They crashed onto the rooftop, rolling through the frozen layer of snow. Metal pipes clanged. Snow-plastered lights flickered. Ryan sprinted after them, boots pounding against the steel as he vaulted onto the roof. Shadow and the man were locked in a violent dance. Two beasts, one made of bone and training, the other of flesh and fury. The knife skittered out of the man's hand and slid across the roof, disappearing behind a ventilation unit. "Shadow!" Ryan shouted again, voice cracking with fear he rarely allowed himself to feel. He had lost men before. He had lost friends. He couldn't lose Shadow. Not like this. Not now. Shadow pinned the man's arm with one paw, jaws bared just inches from his throat. His breaths came out in white clouds as he growled, deep, vibrating, a warning that no predator had ever ignored. Ryan closed the distance, heart slamming against his ribs. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisting until bone cracked with a sickening pop. The man hissed, but didn't scream, proving exactly the kind of monster he was. Ryan slammed him onto the icy surface and snapped the handcuffs onto his wrists in one practiced motion. Cold air burned his lungs as he exhaled. "It's over," he said, voice low. The man's lips curled into a crooked smile, the kind of smile that belonged to those who believed themselves untouchable. "You caught me," he rasped, his voice rough like gravel dragged across metal. "But you'll never catch the system. We are bigger than your rules, officer, bigger than your conscience." Ryan leaned closer, eyes burning with a quiet fury. "I'm not here to catch a system. I'm here to protect the children you stole." Shadow barked once, a sharp, resolute echo of that vow. Police stormed the rooftop moments later. Officer Leah Hart and Officer Grant Dobson seized the man and dragged him toward the stairwell. Snow swirled around them like white ghosts fleeing the scene. Behind them, Sub-Level 3 erupted into controlled chaos as rescue teams spread across the hidden rooms. One by one, frightened children, shivering, hungry, eyes empty, but still alive, were carried out into the light. The system that had tried to erase them had failed. Later, in the medical wing, the little girl from the suitcase spotted Shadow across the hallway. She ran, small legs pumping, teddy bear bouncing in her arms, and crashed into the shepherd with a force that seemed too big for her tiny body. Shadow stood still, chest rising and falling as she buried her face in his fur. "I knew you'd come back," she whispered, voice trembling with relief. Ryan watched them, a knot tightening in his throat. For once, he let the warmth break through the armor he wore. The night had taken so much, but it had given back something too. Shadow lifted his head toward Ryan. The dog's fur was dusted with snow, his tongue hanging out in exhaustion, but those amber eyes glowed with pride, intelligence, and something Ryan had always believed dogs understood better than humans: duty. Hunter, Shadow, was no longer sneezing from the strange scent, no longer tense. He stood tall in the snowfall, breathing in the world he had helped save. No medals needed, no applause required, no anthem playing in the background. Just a quiet truth. Tonight, two beings, one man, one dog, had returned the light to children who had forgotten what it looked like. And sometimes heroes wear vests, sometimes they wear armor, and sometimes they stand on four legs and carry a heart that knows no fear. Some battles happen in silence, some darkness hides right beneath our feet, and sometimes God sends his miracles not as angels with wings, but as a loyal dog and a human heart brave enough to step into the shadows for the sake of a child. That night, when the missing children were carried out of the cold underground rooms, when fear slowly melted from their eyes under the warm glow of the terminal lights, no words were needed. Everyone knew this was more than justice. It was God's reminder that light will always overcome the dark. In our daily lives, we each carry our own unseen suitcases, filled with worry, grief, or wounds we try to hide. But God is there, quietly watching, gently guiding, sending the right people, or even the right dog, at the right moment to pull us back into the light. If this story touched your heart, share it so its warmth can reach someone else who might need it today. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your voice may be the spark of hope for another soul. And if you believe that God still works miracles in our modern world, hit subscribe and stay with us for more stories of courage, faith, and second chances. May God bless you, protect your family, and surround your life with the light only heaven can give. Amen.